Hello, this is Walter Davis with San Diego County Times and the Citizens Internet Television Network. I have the honor to be interviewing Jim Bell, ecological designer, a person that I know that is very concerned about the environment, very concerned about San Diego and San Diego citizens. And so, Jim, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell me what you primarily want to tell the public, sir.
Okay, well, as you said, I'm an ecological designer, and I've been doing this for about 30 years now, and I invented it. I began to get involved, and I realized that, hey, we're destroying our planet's life support system, all of us doing what we're doing, and to make a long story short, set out to figure out ways where we can do the things we need and want to do on a scale that fits our population situation, and so we can operate as modern human beings without causing all these environmental and health problems that we're causing now. And when I began to really think about that, I was thinking about this just the other night, and about, well, what's the ultimate goal, that I'm really searching for, and I thought, well, it's kind of two parts to it. One part is I realize in my own life, and I see it around me, is this whole process of consciousness. I call it consciousness becoming, that's manifesting in each individual on one level or another, and in the whole human family as one big family. And I like that. I think we're the only creature on this planet that is doing that, even though we're causing all kinds of horrible things to happen too. And I see, well, this holds great promise. But when you look at the dangerousness of our universe, there's lots of things that could knock us out. I mean, some big asteroid. The dinosaurs got knocked out in 65 million years ago, and there's been all kinds of catastrophes down through the millenniums, where 90% of all life was wiped out on the planet and things like that. And we see that in the geological records. And so I said, well, the only way to really keep this process of consciousness becoming would be to set up colonies on other planets. And of course, we would want them to be sustainable economies, that they're using whatever life support system they have there in a way that doesn't diminish its beauty, majesty, and productive potential. And the more we do that, the better the chances that we won't get wiped out. I mean, that something could hit our planet and wipe us out, but if there was other colonies in other places, then they would still go on, and this process of consciousness becoming would continue. But of course, that there's no guarantee that can happen, because we're causing so much damage to our planet right now. So the number one step is, well, okay, to have that opportunity to spread out in the universe, in our galaxy, we have to develop a life support sustaining economy and way of life here on our planet. And that was kind of the task I took on when I first started doing this. And also, we need to develop a space debris detection and defense system, so there isn't some errant, random rock headed our way that we're unaware of, which could basically knock our whole life support system a kilter. I mean, a lot of people have heard about this. I think it was in 1908. There was this relatively small asteroid that hit over Russia, and as it came in, it heated up enough that it actually exploded. But it took down. It knocked down 1,000 square miles of forest, just flattened it. And if that would have hit 6 hours later, no more Moscow, because it was on that track. It just hit in a very remote area, so there was hardly anybody was hurt, but of course killed a lot of animals and killed a lot of trees and things. So there's stuff whizzing by us all the time. So it'd be kind of foolish to work real hard to create a life support sustaining economy and way of life, only to have it knocked out by some rock coming at us. We're the first generation in the world that has all the technology we need to discover what's out there. We're actually uncovering them all the time, but there's no concerted world governmental effort to do this. This is like, some of it's like the Levy comets that hit Jupiter or Saturn, I forget which one it was. They were detected by amateur astronomers, but they could have been headed our way. And not seen. So we know how to do that. Instead of killing each other, why aren't we protecting all of us, using our military in that way, instead of using it to figure out how we can get somebody else's water or food or land or oil or whatever it happens to be, or change their religion or impose ours on them or whatever. We have to get past that. And so I've worked primarily here in the San Diego Tijuana region, and the big vision is that, well, gee, if we began to really do this in this region, or really any region on the planet, that it will be so attractive just on the economic front that everybody's going to want to do it. And we found that, well, the very process of becoming renewable energy self-sufficient, if the investment is structured properly, costs less than not doing it. Costs less than staying dependent on imported energy resources. And by becoming energy self-sufficient, you create a surplus of money which can be used to become water self-sufficient. Like, for example, here, we're sort of in a semi-desert area. Rainfall has actually been declining on average recently because of people are projecting that's because of global warming. But we could install some more solar panels on rooftops and over parking lots and generate enough electricity to replace all the water that we currently use in the county by powering large-scale reverse osmosis pumps to convert seawater into fresh water. I mean, to be completely renewable energy self-sufficient at 10% efficiency requires only 51% coverage of our roofs and parking lots if we increase efficiency by 40%. We take 84% with no efficiency improvements. But in my work, and of course I hope people will go to my website, jimbell.com. The publications are all free, and people can download them. They can even print them out if they want to for free. But they basically lay out economic strategies for to make all this happen. That turns out it provides you with energy, water, and food security and all those important things. But it also eliminates greenhouse gas emissions and all the air pollution that we now create because of the way we do things in this point of our time, our evolvement as human creatures. So I guess I'm a solution. Sometimes I tell people I'm like the plumber or the electrician or the carpenter. You're doing it this way and it's causing problems. Well, you can do it this way instead and avoid those problems.
So there's a lot of out-of-the-box thinking here. I heard you talking about extraterrestrial type threats. A lot of people aren't even thinking about that. I also hear a passion for changing the way that we manage our planet, the way we manage our energy, the way that we utilize our resources to redirect a lot of those things from destructive efforts and to survivable efforts and making it a cleaner, more efficient utilization of our resources here on the planet. What do you see now as being some of the primary obstacles for us, being able to attain some of those lofty goals that you illuminated here?
Well, I think mainly it's just people when they're educated. I mean, we have a lot of educated people. They're not really taught about how their planet's life support system works. And it's like, well, gee, they may learn something, maybe about the hydrological cycle, and that's just really sunlight causing water to evaporate and form into clouds and fall as rain or snow or dew or whatever, and replenish the planet. So most people aren't even aware of those kinds of basic things. They may be aware of photosynthesis, but they don't really think of it. Well, gee, the plants are the foundation of everything we do because we either eat the plants directly or we eat the animals that eat the plants. And so without the plants, we're nothing. We're like a parasite on the plants. And so we have to develop ways to utilize our soil so it doesn't diminish its fertility, utilize our groundwater so it never takes groundwater out faster than the natural recharge rate, and maybe even be a little more conservative there, and design our agriculture so we're growing crops that fit the climate, instead of trying to grow crops that you need a lot of water in the desert. Those things don't make sense, and eventually what happens in the desert, the water keeps evaporating, and eventually the soil gets so salty you can't grow anything. And then they have these huge tile fields that you actually dig the whole field out, put in these tiles to drain the water into the estuary. Oh, then what happens? Then the selenium that naturally occurs in the soil becomes concentrated in the estuaries, and you get a bunch of deformed marsh birds and fish and things like that. So it's like everything is connected, but if I call it a biosphere consciousness. It's like you're trying to develop this consciousness where when somebody says, well, did you hear about this new thing, and you're thinking, well, where did the raw materials to make that new thing come from? Or even an old thing, what kind of impacts were sustained when you went to get those materials? What happened when you fabricated or processed those materials? What happens when you make it into something and then you use the thing, and then where does it go when it wears out? And right now in our economy, we don't even ask those questions, or very few of them at all. But there's no reason technically that every laptop, every e-waste component, everything that comes into our homes, everything that's sold in a store, could be designed to be completely easily recycled, non-toxic, if it's going to be added to water or anything like that. So it's going to get out there, biodegradable, so that it'll go back into you return the nutrients ultimately to the earth. And I actually developed a concept when I wrote my first book called True Cost Pricing, and it basically was me thrashing around trying to figure out, well, gee, the free market system has lots of positives to it, but why does it cause so much environmental damage and so many health problems? And what I realized in my research was that we don't actually even have a free market system. We're basically subsidizing certain industries to do certain things. Like we're hearing a lot about subsidizing the oil companies and the uranium companies and all these resources. Well, we in effect have corporate welfare instead of actually having a free market system. So the idea with true cost pricing is you have an independent body that would evaluate how much more money should be added to the price of that laptop, when it's sold, to cover the recovery of all the resources, so they get back to industry to make a new laptop or into something else. And what that does is, of course, the person who's buying it is going to pay all the costs, which is only fair in a free market system. They're the ones buying something to benefit. They should pay all the costs associated with it. But the most important part is it incentivizes the manufacturers to redesign their products so they don't have to add those costs. And like companies like Dell Computer, right now, Dell Computer takes back its computers when they wear out. But they're penalized economically for doing that right now if their competitors aren't doing it. But with true cost pricing, they would have an economic advantage doing the right thing. So you're really using the free market system to incentivize the things that are positive when you look at all the costs, cradle to cradle.
So that's a very detailed way of looking at it that most people don't look at. I mean, I never thought about that in terms of a computer company taking back their old and used computers and how that could be a cost for them as opposed to their competitors being involved in that. How do you see a way in which we can change that mindset? Do you see a way that we as ordinary citizens can affect that change?
Well, everybody who has become more conscious, we all vote with our dollars on one level or another, and you become a better voter, as you become more aware. But we can't really do everything, unless it's done, say, system-wide, like economy-wide. I mean, we can only get so pure, but that's a good start, and that's gets back to the whole thing about consciousness raising. And when I'm talking about consciousness, it's not like a woo-woo thing. It's like a practical looking at the world you exist in and making sense out of it, and looking and delving into the whole system. It sounds real complicated when you say it at first, but it actually turns out to make things easier when you begin to look at the whole, because everything begins to fit instead of, oh, we do this and then, gee, it caused this other problem. I never realized it was going to do that, and that's because we don't have that biospheric consciousness. We're not looking at where did it come from, the whole line of questions that we need to ask when we unleash anything onto the world.
So there's a whole series of ignorant decisions being made, essentially. Ignorance being that you just don't know. Do you think that we should start fostering this type of education in kindergarten, elementary school? Is that a way to assuage some of this?
Oh, definitely. Kids, I mean, I have done a lot of talks to young kids, usually fourth grade up, but when I go in there and talk to them, I almost never get through a lecture because they get so excited, they get so involved in it, and that's really the whole point. Their ideas are coming out. I actually do this exercise with them where I say, well, first of all, they've never seen me before. I'm just walking into a class, and I'm a big guy with a beard and everything. So I ask them easy questions like, well, give me examples of something that's recyclable, and they're all raising their hands, right, because they all know that. And then I say, well, how about biodegradable, and they're, some of them have compost piles, so they'll figure that out too. And then I say, what about biodegradable and recyclable, and I'll give them hints along the way if it's lagging, but generally they figure that out too. And then somebody will, we're using a word like compostable, and I'll ask, does anybody out there have a compost pile at home? And there's usually one kid that does, and I'll say, well, explain your compost pile, and he'll explain it, and I'll add any extra information that he left out, of it, and then I say, okay, we're going to imagine we're going on this long space journey, and we're going this great distance, and our rocket ship's ready to go, but we need to, provision it. So what do we need to take? And they come up, we need air, and we need water, we need food, and all this stuff, and I say, well, there's another problem. We're going such a great distance that our ship isn't big enough to take enough air, water, and food to get us there. So what do we have to do? And then they basically design a life support system. We have to have plants, and then we have to, what do the plants do? Well, they provide the food and the oxygen and all this stuff. And then finally, at the end, I say, well, you eat food and you drink water and liquids, and eventually you have to go to the bathroom. What are you going to do with the waste? And universally, and it's like 4th, 5th, 6th grade kids, it's like, ooh, the first thing, and then it's we'll flush it out into space. And then I say, well, wait a minute, where did that come from? And they'll trace it back. It came from us, and they realize they have to recycle. And that's really, our planet is basically a solar-powered recycling system, and all we have to do is work with it instead of in as the word you use, ignorance or just oblivious to it, to attain our aims. I like to think about it as we have to design economies and ways of life that do not diminish the beauty, majesty, and productive potential of our planet's life support system. It's as simple as that. And when you think about it, it's magnificent. We have this. If you, I'm sort of, I guess, an agnostic, but it actually would give you reason to believe in God. Just when you begin to delve into how our planet works and see how the marvelous harmony and interaction, and it's very efficient. Like a healthy rainforest would, lose maybe 2 or 3 pounds of nutrients a year over a whole hectare, like 2.5 acres. But if you clear cut it, it's losing 30,000 tons a year, of nutrients. So it's like, well, it doesn't mean you can't harvest anything from the rainforest, but you just have to play by the rules, and help the rainforest do what it does, which is protect the soil and primarily keeps the nutrients in the biology of the situation. So these are all knowable and doable, but we're just not taught about it when we're young. And then even worse, we're not taught about that. We're not taught about, okay, then how could we grow our food in a way that wouldn't cause loss of soil nutrients and erosion, and where does sewage fit into that? Well, gee, maybe we should keep the sewage free of toxic materials and then compost it and then put it back on the farmland to maintain a micronutrient balance. So that, because that's the only way you could actually have sustainable agriculture forever, as long as the sun shines, is if you keep returning those nutrients. We lose a lot now, but we mask them by using fossil fuels, non-renewable fossil fuels, to replace nutrients lost through poor agricultural practices. But that's obviously not sustainable.
So it looks like we need to be involved in a massive public information campaign.
Yeah, I actually wrote open letter to billionaires of the world, and I basically said, well, if one of you gets this, $1 billion worth of education, really just training people, like whether they're military or business or whatever their profession, to train them into, well, here's how your profession fits into being a positive force in making all this happen.
What kind of response have you gotten back?
Well, one thing that I've noticed is, like, my website, if Jim Bell's a pretty common name, but if you just type in Jim Bell in most search engines, I'll come up, one or two, or certainly on the first page. So somebody must be checking it out. And then when I ran for mayor in the past several times, and the last time where I actually ran through the whole primary, I was running against a sitting mayor, a sitting board of supervisor member, and a millionaire, a multi-millionaire, who spent $1.4 million in his campaign, and I still got almost 19,000 votes, or 7.6% of the vote, and only spent $6,000, for a spread out city like San Diego. So, and I only have the times of the debates to get, they ask you, they don't ask you questions that are really relevant to this kind of stuff, but they ask you a question, and I turn it to get my 30 seconds into talking about sustainability or renewable energy self-sufficiency or things like that.
What would you have done differently had you been elected mayor? What
Well, first thing I would have got all the city staff together and educated them about this stuff, so they all kind of knew what we're shooting for, why, and all that sort of stuff. And then I would have worked with the council to have them declare the city a community choice aggregate municipality, because that.
What does that mean?
Well, it basically it's a state law. It's AB 117, and it allows a city to basically pass some ordinances and declare itself a community choice aggregation municipality, and it means that it can basically stay with its utility if it wants, or it can go shop around or come up with its own kind of a plan. Most of the people that have done it, the cities that have been exploring it, they've been thinking, well, we can buy cheaper natural gas. Well, I'm saying no, you don't want to take that step, because natural gas is going to run out too. So why not go directly to renewable energy self-sufficiency, and finally solve the problem once and for all, and not ever have to go back to it again. And of course, as we do that, we're going to get better at the solar panels. I mean, they're getting down to close to $1 a peak watt, which is sort of a magical number with these they call them thin film solar panels, and they're projecting they're going to be even cheaper than that before much longer. Well, that means that even though coal and oil and nuclear power and everything else is highly subsidized, solar would beat the pants off of it. And it's the whole idea here is to use the free market system intelligently. Use it. I mean, the deal between the free market system and the public isn't just one-sided. What now it is like, well, if you got an idea and you can make money and so you pollute whatever, like that's okay to a certain degree. But what if you had the second part of it is, yeah, we're fine with you to be creative and become a billionaire as long as the public really does benefit in the long run. And now that isn't really the case in most situations. I mean, like with computers, we benefit in terms of this new technology, but if they're all toxic waste, that's going to come back and bite us, and already is.
Well, that's really something else. Renewable energy, the concept seems so attractive, yet some of the components cost a lot of money right now, in terms of people not being able to afford solar power or wind power equipment to put on their homes. I know there's some subsidies that have come out and things like that. What is your vision in terms of the affordability?
Yeah.
How is that going to be affected by technology?
Well, it's getting cheaper and cheaper all the time, but even say it didn't, say we only had what we have right now, or even not even quite as good. We have some pretty good stuff now, but even if make very conservative assumptions, if the city became a community choice aggregate municipality, then it could put out requests for proposals to energy service companies and even to SDG&E or other utilities. Say, well, we see it's in our interest to become renewable energy self-sufficient locally, or to the greatest degree possible, because that keeps the money in our economy. The money that we now export to pay for what we import stays in the local economy and provides all kinds of local jobs and business opportunities, much better situation. So we want to get a company to invest in that for us, like make our homes and buildings more efficient, and also put solar panels over rooftops and parking lots. And if it's structured right, you'll make a nice fat profit. We end up owning the system, and we're energy secure. And that's and it doesn't require any subsidies whatsoever. It's a completely free market plan, and that's because we invest the startup capital. You invest it almost all in efficiency, 97% in efficiency, and 3% in solar. And you set your level for the efficiency at $1,000 per kilowatt of capacity saved. That's much cheaper than $5,000 for a kilowatt hour capacity to produce for solar panels, though that's going down rapidly. But that gives you the quick payback, and you're out of debt, and as people pay the bill, they're funding the continuation of making you energy self-sufficient. And this can be done pretty much anywhere in the world. I mean, here we'd probably lean more on solar, but some places the wind blows more. Some places biomass crops would make more sense. It's a mix and match.
What do you think about these new biofuels?
Well, for the most part, I don't think they're that well thought through. But if you were generating sufficient, like for example in the scenario I painted before, we achieved 40% increase in efficiency, we've got 51% of our roofs and parking lots covered. Well, that includes gasoline and everything else in there too. So that means we're using some of that solar generated electricity to run vehicles directly, or maybe we're using it in the pyrolysis systems to convert the plant materials into liquid and gaseous fuels, and even charcoal. So you have three sources of fuel from it, and you could tie that with, well, we have wildfires here. We have all these wildfire problems. Well, what if we were thinning the chaparral, which has almost the same energy content pound for pound as bituminous coal? It's about 75% the same, and you don't have to go under the ground to get it. It's right on the surface. Very energy dense. And if we harvest on contours to protect against erosion, and don't harvest during when wildlife are breeding in the springtime and stuff like that, then we have a renewable crop which we can apply electricity to convert to liquid fuels until we make everything electric. The only thing that's holding up the electric is we still need better batteries, batteries that'll give us longer storage and quicker charge ups. But that's happening. That's getting closer and closer. And then you have, there's an electric car being manufactured in India. Not an electric car. It's a compressed air car, and they're saying it'll give you 120 miles range, at plenty fast speeds, just by compressing air in these four tanks, and it requires 5 minutes to top out your system. And of course that's renewable electricity being used to compress air.
Wow. That all just seems so Star Trek-ish. But it seems like it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Do you see the government taking the initiative at all to get this to happen?
Not so far. You have to give Schwarzenegger a little bit of credit, and he has pushed this to some degree. But the complaint I have is they're following this old model of subsidies, whereas the plan that's available on my website shows a completely free market approach that requires no subsidies at all. The thing I don't like about the subsidies, because they've got to come from someplace. Okay, the subsidies for doing something like this, or even building power transmission line and things like that, it's coming out of ratepayer pockets. And some of the ratepayers are renters. Well, they can't benefit from the subsidies for putting solar on their roof because they don't have any incentive to do it, because they're not going to live there forever and they wouldn't own it anyway. But with the plan that I have, they would have an incentive because they'd be getting that 10% reduction in their bill no matter what happened. So they have an incentive, and they're ultimately going to pay for it over time, but they don't have to come up with any upfront money, and they still get their 10% cut.
Wow, and
it'll actually go down, because as we get better at solar panels and all that, the efficiencies are going to go down. Like, remember, I'm only basing mine on 10% efficiency.
What countries do you see leading the world in this type of alternative energy technology?
Well, Germany is a big one, and Japan too. They're both really, and China will pretty soon probably be the biggest photovoltaic manufacturer in the world, and be selling them all over the world. We're doing a lot here in California, but still, see, people don't really understand the magnitude of this. Our current mayor, he sort of took on the same plan that the mayor before him took on. They were going to install 50 megawatts of renewables over 10 years. Well, that'd be 5 megawatts a year. Well, at that rate, it's going to take 2,000 years. That's obviously they don't understand about global warming. They don't get the situation that we're in and what we need to do to actually address it. It's just that, and it's like I don't want to blame them or say they're evil or bad people, but they haven't educated themselves, and they haven't really surrounded themselves with people that do know.
Well, that's really, it seems irresponsible that we would have a government where this kind of technology is available. I've seen things happen in Brazil. Okay, for example, with the sugar cane.
Yeah.
And so, and you said Japan and Germany, so there's some very advanced things happening in various parts of the world. The levitation trains, and I see that they're building new freeways, and it appears as though the 15 freeway, for example, they're working on, is going to be obsolete once they finish, getting it done. It seems as though we would have a public transportation system with fuel prices being as high as they are. It seems as though we would have a train going between San Diego and Temecula, for example. Do you have any feedback on this process? Why is it that we're pursuing or continuing to pursue these very backward ways of managing our public transportation?
Well, it's like you say. Sometimes they say we have the best government money can buy, and I think there's some truth to that. Not necessarily that people are criminal, but they're personable, and they attract certain people. They don't really do their homework, and they're viable and manipulatable. And if you're not playing in that game, you're not going to really get your 2 cents in there too much. I've had a little experience having a slight influence because I've run and people wanted me to endorse them after the primary.
Mm-hmm.
But once they're in, you never hear from them again. Or they don't want to hear any new ideas or anything like that. So, but it's instead of thinking about just being discouraged by it, I just go, well, that's just like gravity or anything else. Like you trip on a crack in the sidewalk, you don't say, "Oh, I have to crawl the rest of my life." You get up, you pay attention, you do things like that, and this is the human dynamic that we're faced with is sort of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like gravity. It's like centrifugal force. Instead of personalizing and getting and copying an attitude about it,
mm-hmm.
or getting frustrated or angry with it, like you don't get angry with gravity unless you're not thinking too straight. So I just keep my focus on, well, how can I figure out a better way to help people understand this and see the importance of it and the opportunity of it. It's a tremendous opportunity to get over this rough spot we're in now on this planet and create a very prosperous future here,
mm-hmm.
and have the wherewithal to go out into space and set up these other colonies in other parts of the galaxy.
Now, how does one become an ecological designer? How did you come to this particular profession?
Well, my first thing that happened to me was I moved out to a house with it was kind of a little group house, and one friend of mine had been there the longest, and he was doing organic gardening, and he had a couple of goats, so we learned how to milk the goats, and he had a bunch of books about the environment. I remember reading the first one was Poverty of Power by Barry Commoner, and I just read it, and I was just like blown away because it basically just showed how we're destroying our planet. It's amazing how well our planet is held up to all our assaults, but obviously at some point it's going to fail in some way, and it probably won't be very helpful to us and other higher forms of life. So and then after I read that book and I read some other ones, they were all about the problems, and so I said, well, what's the solutions?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to just hear about the problems. And so I began, spending, like days at a time in the different libraries, UCSD library, the engineering library, the main library, all wherever there was information about wastewater treatment,
mm-hmm.
about renewable energy, all these things, and went to San Diego State's library and the downtown library, and there was the internet was just kind of coming in. I didn't really have a computer or any access to it at the time, but more or less doing a search.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I would find someone I could get a hold of, who, say a local hydrologist who taught at San Diego State,
Mm-hmm.
I would call them up, arrange a meeting, share my ideas, and usually they would laugh a lot initially, but then I'd say, well, what should I read, where should I go and all that, and they'd tell me, and I'd go do it, and I'd come back. By the time I came back, I was ahead of them because they were so narrow in their focus, whereas I was looking at all aspects of inhabiting this planet. And when you begin to look at it that way, it actually makes it easier to solve problems, because you realize that if you made this move, you're going to create these other problems down the way, whereas if you did it a different way, you're going to avoid those problems.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I did that with every subject, and I was working with a couple other people at the time. We were all at the library. We were all doing this work, and after we created this basic slideshow lecture that we began going around and giving. I began to ask myself, what am I actually doing? What do I actually do? And I came up with the term ecological designer. Like, I can help people design things, whether it's a planet or it's a city lot, to maximize its. But it's almost like what you're trying to do. You're trying to maximize the benefit of the natural resources that come to the site, like sun, rain, wind, all those kinds of things. And that's the basic rule. And then you're trying to make sure nutrients get where they need to go and aren't lost in any way. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty common sense when you get down to it. And of course, over the years I've developed a lot of experience, so I'm getting better, and I'm still learning. It's like the planet is very complicated.
Yeah, sounds like it. Sounds like a lot of little integral parts working, and it's the way that we have been doing things and the way that we need to start doing things.
Right.
So it's a real learning curve there, isn't it?
Yes.
What else? What else do you want to impart to the public? Is there any important message or thing that you want to talk about with the public, since you have the public's ear right now?
Well, I think one thing is don't, if you become aware of these things, it's kind of easy to get overwhelmed and, get into a negative space. And it's kind of like, well, that's a waste of time. I mean, if you're really serious about wanting to make things better, you can't waste time, thinking about how bad they are.
Mm-hmm.
You want to acknowledge it, of course. You don't want to be Pollyannish and pretend like bad things aren't happening. They are happening.
Mm-hmm.
But you want to go, okay, that's given. That's the given. That's where I start. That's the foundation of our action. And of course, I haven't, the world hasn't been saved. I won't consider myself successful until our whole planet is, has a life support sustaining economy and way of life. I mean, it's anything less than that is inconsequential. It's kind of like we have this wonderful old house. I mean, it's just a beautiful mansion. We call it the biosphere, and there's some paint feeling in some of the bathrooms, and there's a step that needs to be nailed down a little better, and some weeding in the garden, and the kitchen's on fire. Mm-hmm. And we treat it, because it's big, we sort of. I mean, there's people who are, like with the philanthropists, they're trying to educate high school students better. Well, that's good. I think that's a good idea. Mm-hmm. They're trying to help children, help with health problems and give them better treatment and things like that. That's a good idea. They're trying to help AIDS. But if they don't also put a lot of effort into developing a sustainable relationship with their life support system, mm-hmm. none of those good deeds will be sustained. Because they'll fall flat on their face because of water failure or food failure or disease or whatever else. There's so many different calamities that could befall us because we don't, work with our life support system.
So you named a number of calamities, and as we were talking, like the dinosaurs being extinct. Yeah. Do you see a threat to us today in terms of us becoming extinct?
Yeah, if we screw around too much, it's like, like we're our planet's life support system is suffering, what they call the death of 1,000 wounds or 1,000,000 wounds or whatever. Like no one is probably going to change it enough to hurt us too badly, but the cumulative effect of all of them, and now then you have global warming coming on board on top of all these other things as well. It's not that the planet needs saving. It's like we need to save ourselves if we care about the future, care about our children, care about future generations. And I happen to do, and I think most people do too. If they really look in their heart, they're going to find that they do care about that. And okay, if we do care about that, what should we do? And that's all I've done with my life is just figure, well, if I care about it, given what power, I don't have much money, whatever I have, well, I can learn, I can improve myself, and I can share what I discover with people.
So it sounds like you're very passionate about, the environment, and I wish there were many more people like this that were really focused.
Well, we're trying to help them. We're trying to help make those people.
Exactly. And you can go to your website, jimbell.com.
Yes.
And you have free downloads on there that are in HTML and PDF format.
And that can be printed.
And they're free.
Yeah,
they're free of charge. And that costs you a lot of money, right, to do all that research?
Well, it was my own. It was my time. It cost me a lot of time, and with the web and everything, research is easier than it was when I was doing the initial work. But it's all. I mean, it's the same. It's once you get your arms around enough of it, then it's like you're just adding to the categories of new ideas that have come here or there, and then of course with the biosphere consciousness, then you're able to see through the ones that don't really make sense and be able to promote the ones that actually do. I mean, even solar panels don't really make sense completely ecologically yet, but I believe, and my research shows, that they can be designed so they can be completely recycled forever into new solar panels.
Why would you have to recycle a solar panel?
Well, they're warranted for 25 years, but eventually there's some deterioration. Sunlight is a pretty powerful deteriorator, but so they're expecting they're going to last 40 years or so. But I think eventually they'll last 100 years or 200 years. But we're not there yet. But even then, even if they last 200 years, even 1,000 years, we want them designed so they can be easily recycled to be made into new solar panels or something else.
Wow, that's really profound. I never thought about recycling solar panels. Now, you talked about how it's irresponsible to use like corn, and that's because you're taking away nutrients from the soil, correct? And that's also going to drive up the price of corn, which is a food item. And
people making ethanol from corn, yes, definitely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not even a very good crop. I mean, like if you're going to really grow a crop to grow ethanol, you should be growing sorghum. It takes a lot less water, give you 3 times as much production for the same size. There's other. I mean, it's not my field of specialty, but other people can tell you the same thing. But the key thing is if you're getting your process energy from renewable sources, wind, direct sun, whatever, then say you have a given amount of tree trimmings, for example. Just you cut all these trees, you got grass clippings, you got all this plant material that's going to the landfill. Some of it's being composted, but with solar generated electricity, you could heat it up in closed chambers and distill off liquid fuels, gases, everything, and then you return. Then what's left goes to the soil, back to the soil again. So the micronutrients, you're just taking some of the food stuff, but with soil, I mean, you have to realize you can only take so much from soil because you look at the way a normal grassland happens or even a forest. Things grow, they die, they fall over, they decay. The nutrients more or less stay in place. But when you start shipping things thousands of miles, you're taking those micronutrients away. And unless you compensate, like if we're going to ship grain to Russia, we should be getting Russian sewage back here to put it on the farmlands where we grew the grain to replace the micronutrients. And if that transport is solar powered or renewable energy powered, well, it's okay. We're not spewing oil all over the place or things like that. I mean, this is a very deep, level of, that's why I call it the biospheric consciousness, because it's not a like a metaphysical consciousness. It's a just paying attention consciousness.
And just really focusing on exactly what we're doing with our environment and how we're living on the planet and things of that nature.
And where my work primarily focuses is on, okay, given that, how do we use the knowledge of how our planet works to develop this new economy and way of life?
So, in other words, that there are a lot of jobs that can be created as a result of embracing this new technology. What are some of the examples of some jobs that could be created?
Well, like the electrician union here in town is already training people to install solar panels and set them up, and so those are those kind of jobs. We in my work we just looked at in the paper. If you go to my website and click on the button at the bottom of the homepage called Green Papers, it is a very detailed study of looking at the difference of the jobs created building a power line, which would be about maybe 10,000 jobs, compared to becoming renewable energy self-sufficient, which would be 124,000 jobs.
Wow.
And what's paying for those 124,000 jobs is the money that you were paying for natural gas is now going to pay people.
Mm-hmm.
And because once you have the capacity to capture it, the energy source is free and it's even delivered free.
Well, this all sounds so very logical to me. I just can't. I'm frustrated. Why can't we do this now? I want it now. I want, the air to be clean and the waste to be properly managed.
Well, that's what would have happened if I'd have been elected mayor. Because, we talked about, first educating and I would be on Channel 24 like this, all the time, educating the public to these very ideas and how to do it and how to work it and answering all their questions. And the ideas would be improved through that process. I mean, I'm limited in my view, I probably learn more from other people than they learn from me right now, because I'm set up to do that. I'm set up to hear, instead of having my own little, movie going. As soon as they start talking, I'm going, okay, I don't want to miss anything, and that's a huge advantage. And I'm just trying to help other people to be able to do the same thing. And the potential is definitely there. I mean, there's no reason why we couldn't have a life support sustaining economy and future on this planet. But we have to actually do it. We can't just hope for it. We have to, understand how the planet works and how, to use that knowledge to create the systems that we need. And, like the reason I don't get frustrated so much is that even though I know what you're saying, is I think, well, when the first person said, I think slavery's wrong, and what do you mean? It's in the Bible, It's like the whole world came crashing down on them, and somebody else said, no, I think he's right, it is wrong, and it built that way, and nobody would have ever thought it could end, but there's no sanctioned slavery in the world, no government sanctioned slavery in the world, and then women getting the vote. If you would have taken a poll just amongst women in 1915 and said, do you think women should vote? They would have voted it down, most likely. But by 1920, we had universal suffrage. So what was the magic? The civil rights movement, same thing. It seemed impossible. I remember when I was watching Martin Luther King marching through the streets, and I was totally on board with him, but I was thinking, just you're asking too much, it won't happen as fast, and I was proven totally wrong, with that assessment of it, that it was exactly what needed to happen.
So there was a critical mass
or something, and so I never worry about that part of it. I just try to keep focused on doing the best I can do with what capabilities I have. And that's really all any of us can do. And the more of us that we line up together with each other, toward making these, the deeper our understanding of the problems and the solutions, hey, enough of us become conscious enough soon enough, all good is possible.
So that's what the purpose of this interview is to encourage you to go to jembell.com so that you can get some of this information regarding how we can be more responsible stewards of our environment. And be sure to watch Jim Bell's PowerPoint presentation on the Citizens Internet Television Network. That'll be coming around on an email as well, because we're taking advantage of some high-tech technology. the thing that we're using now, video teleconferencing, that has some implications toward the environment as well, doesn't it?
And education, and we just need to get the true cost pricing included, and we're home free on it. And but that we don't have to do it all at once. It's you have to learn to crawl, and then you walk, and then you run. So we're kind of we're at the crawling stage. I sometimes think of myself, in this sort of this consciousness game as being like 9 years old, but most of the people around me are 6. Well, I still got a long way to go. I still got a lot of growth and maturity to go, but I can help people who don't know what I know to learn it quick. I mean, I spent thousands of hours trying to get this insight and understand this. Well, I can help people learn it in a few hours.
Well, that's great. I'm glad that you did all the work that you've done. I looked at your materials. They're just outstanding, and it makes it very, very clear. I mean, imagine being able to cover half of the rooftops, 51% of the rooftops and parking decks here in San Diego County, and being energy efficient, pretty much, right, in terms of electricity.
Well, no, that would make us completely energy self-sufficient.
Okay, completely.
Gasoline, diesel, natural gas, and electricity.
Let's do that today. What are we waiting for?
Well, it's part of people say, well, it costs too much. See, there's a lot of people talk just to sound smart, like they know something about something, be part of the conversation, be part of the group, whatever, and so we end up with a lot of sort of things that are aren't really that well thought through, and they get picked up. Oh, they seem to know what they're talking about. I guess that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I've done is gone in and done the homework. How much energy do we use per capita, for example? Mm-hmm. How many square miles of solar panels do you need, to supply that kind of energy? Mm-hmm. So that's the only difference. I've just gone in, instead of just offhandedly making statements about it, I've gone in and done the homework.
And I can tell, looking around here at your office, you have all these charts and diagrams and all the writings that you've done. I've seen you do lectures. Isn't it exciting now that we have Jim Bell's lectures available on the internet, on internet television, and they can be emailed to people. So if you're receiving this email of this interview, please email it around to all of your constituents. Send it out to everybody in your address book so we can spread the word in terms of how we can be better stewards of our planet. Is there anything else you'd like to convey to the public during this interview?
Well, I do go around and give talks, to groups, and so if they just go to my, give me an email and a phone number, and we'll return the call to set something up. I don't like to travel too much because I don't want to add greenhouse gases and all this stuff. And my car's getting a little bit old, but local here in San Diego County, I'm definitely open to go around and give talks to people.
Well, the great thing is that now you can expand beyond even the borders of this country, utilizing this type of technology.
Yeah, well, and that's one thing that we should mention too, because what I'm planning to do, and people who are picking this up, I want to teach a class via this ability here to help anybody in other parts of the world to develop a sustainable economy where they live. And I would work with them of what are the resources you need to gather, like maps, and because when you're doing this, you need to know what's the rainfall, how many solar hours a year, what's the general climate, heat, cold, all those kinds of things, weather extremes, and you basically build up a whole bunch of knowledge about a place, and then from that knowledge, now you've got real stuff, and then you can actually develop a system that's going to serve the needs of that particular part of the world. And really having a sustainable economy worldwide is everybody having a sustainable economy wherever they live.
So it's going to take a lot of homework, a lot of education, but you feel optimistic that we're going to be able to be better stewards of our planet.
Well, the potential is there. There's no question that the potential is there. It's just, are we wise enough? I actually wrote this in my first book. It said it was like on the first page or the introduction or something. The human family has infinite cleverness, but about zero wisdom. And so we have to work. We have to work on that wisdom part. And you had the Native American Indians, 7 generations. We do something now. Try to look out 7 generations. What's going to be the impact of it? Really discuss it on that level. I'm looking out a million generations, or why not an infinite number of generations? Why limit ourselves?
So right now, we have a lot of people that are incarcerated for nonviolent offenses, involving drugs. What would be your feeling in terms of developing a green-collar workforce and maybe taking some of these people that are previously convicted and train the non-violent ones perhaps to be people that install the solar panels and have more of a customer interaction once they've gotten treatment, and maybe the more violent people that have been violent, perhaps they could be people manufacturing the hardware. What do you think about that particular idea?
I think it's fine. I think it's great. We want to, we're supposed to be trying to, to rehabilitate people, and what better way, and I think a lot of, because I grew, when I moved down here, my parents were, pretty poor, and they moved to Linda Vista, which was the cheapest place to live, and Linda Vista was pretty much like it is now, but different groups of people. As a white kid, I was in the minority in my neighborhood, but we got along okay, but it was a tough neighborhood in the sense that there was all these pressures to fight and things like that. I even got expelled from junior high school in the 8th grade for fighting in class. And I felt so bad. I felt so ashamed and everything, but you kind of had to do it in order not to be a victim. And I would think, well, where were the adults, during all that time, whenever all this victimization was going on, and it was just everybody trying to establish their little pecking order in whatever scheme it was. And then by luck, my parents moved out to El Cajon, and I ended up going to Grossmont High School, totally different environment in the 9th grade. And I never had to fight again, there, because, well, first of all, nobody wanted to mess with me because I was from that other place. But as soon as I figured out that nobody wanted to mess with me, then I was joyful because nobody wanted to mess with me, so I never had to fight anymore, which I never wanted to. Fighting is stressful, very stressful to be confronted by somebody, and you got to duke it out with them. And I don't think any of the kids really enjoy it. They pose that they do, but but it's mainly just for bravado and trying to protect themselves.
So how can we implement this, to create green-collar jobs for people that are impoverished and people that are previously convicted? Do you have a vision for how we can implement that?
Well, that's what leadership is. Because if we became, if I was mayor, we became community choice aggregate municipality, we would be digging homeless people out of the bushes to clean them up and, train them to get them to do work, because we need to install so much, so fast to really kind of protect ourselves that we got full employment for the next 30 or 40 years, easily. And I even was in front of a group of developers, the Building Industries Association's governing council, and I got a chance to give them a 15-minute talk. And I said, hey, we need a sustainable economy. And I know who I am because I've been around for a while. And we owe it to our children, and all that stuff. And I said, and if me or somebody like me ever gets elected mayor, you're going to have more work to do than you ever dreamt of. They were like surprised. And I said, well, we need to remodel practically every building in the region and keep up with new stuff. Who do you think is going to do that? You're the people that know how to do it. You're the general contractors. I mean, you have the skills. Who else would we want to do it? And they were like, oh, it's environmentalists isn't anti-developer. No, I'm just anti-stupid development. If it's intelligent, if it fits our needs and it fits the needs of future generations, I'm perfectly happy with it.
What do you think about the environmental terrorism that's been going on?
I think that's wrong. I think when you destroy anything, it's a form of violence, and it gains you less. It emboldens the people who are trying to find excuses for being hurtful to the environment, and we lose support of people who are trying to bring this forward nonviolently. I mean, we've tried violence over and over again, and they're still trying it now. It never solves anything. It just keeps new violence emerges from it. So we have to figure out new ways to get along with each other and new ways to do the things we need and want to do that are not only not violent to each other, but not violent to animals and not violent to the environment in general.
recently when I interviewed Congressman Filner, he indicated that if we got people out in the parade, he'd get in front of it. Seems like this is an issue that we need people to get out in large numbers in a parade because it's about our very survival as human beings. Can you reflect on that some?
Well, it's like we can demonstrate and things like that, and I saw that interview and I thought it was an excellent interview. But I think we need more than that because what I see is in most cases we have the blind leading the blind. You got people say, "Oh, we want a sustainable economy," but they don't even know what that means. And so I have an idea, and they're off in a little niche of something and forget the big picture of it. So that's why I keep focusing on the education part of it. And I'm hoping, just as when we talked about the women vote and ending slavery and stuff like that through that effort we'll reach that threshold, and it'll seem like, well, gee, we should have done this all along, just like it seems like in those other areas.
So again, that reiterates the importance of a public information campaign where people are educated and become more aware of the intricacies surrounding this issue.
Yeah, and also the common sense of it. It's like you don't have to understand, how every fungus works in the soil, but you understand generally that the soil is a decomposing system that basically takes the things that die and turns them into nutrients for new plants and new growth. I mean, you don't need to know exactly how it happens. You just need to know that it does happen and how to facilitate it happening. And it's pretty simple. It's moisture and sunlight and air and things like that is all you really need.
Okay, so with that, I guess we're coming kind of close to the end of the interview here. I want to make sure, though, that you get all of your points in. Is there anything else that you want to share with the public?
Well, I guess the thing is like, I think we touched on this before, but the whole idea of don't let it get you down. Don't let experiences of life rob you of your idealism. Just become a smarter idealist. Use your newfound knowledge or wisdom to be a smarter, to make the good thing happen with less, static along the way. And that's a thing that I've been trying to learn, because I think, well, gee, if I was really conscious enough and I could really communicate this clearly enough, we'd probably be home free. But I obviously haven't reached that level of consciousness yet to do it that well. But I'm working on it, and that's all we can do. We just work on it and keep trying to be better.
Okay. Well, great. Well, I really appreciate the interview.
Oh, my pleasure.
I'm very much enlightened after the interview and talking to Jim Bell. I'm also going to be attaching with the email that this interview is going out with an interview that we did on the public access television channel. Be sure to watch us on the Elise Smith Cooper Community Issues Tapestry of Concerns, and you did an interview on there as well.
Yes.
that came out very nicely. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you very much for watching this. Please forward it to everybody within your email address book. Thank you very much.
And thank you from me too.